Lavazza Qualita Oro is one of the most consistent coffees you can buy almost anywhere in the world, and that consistency is exactly why it belongs on this list. This blend has existed for decades with minimal changes, which already tells you something important. It's built for stability, not trends. It's made from 100% Arabica beans, sourced mainly from Central and South America, and roasted to a medium profile that avoids the extremes that usually create bitterness or stomach discomfort. The flavor is balanced, not sharp, not acidic, and not smoky to the point of masking defects. That matters because overly dark roasts are often used to hide low-quality beans. Lavazza doesn't do that here. This coffee is widely available in Europe, the Americas, Asia, and Australia, both as whole bean and ground, and it performs well whether you brew it as espresso, mocha pot, or drip. You don't need special equipment or technique to make it drinkable, which is a sign of well-processed coffee. It's not marketed as a luxury product, and it's not pretending to be artisanal. It's simply reliable, clean, and easy to live with day after day. The medium roast profile means you can adjust your brewing parameters without dramatically altering the cup. If you brew it slightly weaker, it remains flavorful. If you brew it stronger, it doesn't turn bitter. That flexibility is rare and valuable for everyday use. The bean selection process at Lavazza focuses on consistency over complexity. They blend beans from multiple origins within Central and South America, which allows them to compensate for seasonal variations in any single source. When one region experiences a drought or produces a weaker crop, beans from another region fill the gap. This approach prioritizes uniformity, and while it may not produce the most exciting cup, it produces the most reliable one for someone drinking coffee every morning for years. That reliability compounds into something more valuable than occasional excellence. Illy Classico takes a different approach but ends up in the same place: consistency and control. Illy uses a single blend of Arabica beans sourced from multiple countries, but with unusually strict quality standards. The company is known for rejecting a large percentage of beans that don't meet their internal criteria, which reduces variability between batches. The roast is medium, leaning slightly lighter than traditional Italian espresso, which preserves aroma without pushing acidity too far. The result is a coffee that tastes almost identical whether you buy it in Italy, the United States, Brazil, or Japan. That global uniformity is rare. Illy is also transparent about storage and packaging, using pressurized tins to reduce oxidation. This matters more than people realize because stale coffee is one of the main reasons people experience bitterness and digestive discomfort. Most coffee begins degrading within days of roasting once exposed to air. The pressurized packaging extends that window significantly, meaning the coffee you open at home is closer to its optimal state. Illy Classico is not cheap, but it's not overpriced either when you consider how predictable it is. You know what you're getting every time, and for many people, that predictability is more valuable than novelty. What sets Illy apart is their vertical integration. They control more of the supply chain than most brands, from bean selection through roasting and packaging. This reduces the number of external variables that can compromise quality. They also invest heavily in research, including studies on how different roasting profiles affect caffeine content, acidity levels, and digestive response. This scientific approach shows up in the final product. The coffee is engineered to minimize the factors that cause discomfort while maximizing the factors that create satisfaction. Peet's Coffee Major Dickason's blend is a strong example of how darker roasts don't automatically mean poor quality. This blend is roasted dark, but with control. The beans are fully developed, not burned, which is the key difference. You get depth and body without the ashy aftertaste that usually comes from over-roasting. Peet's focuses heavily on sourcing and freshness, especially in markets like the United States, Canada, and parts of Asia. While availability is more limited in Europe, it is still accessible through major retailers and online platforms in many countries. This coffee works particularly well for people who prefer a bold cup but still want clarity in flavor. It doesn't rely on artificial flavor notes or gimmicks. It's straightforward, strong, and consistent. If you drink coffee primarily for taste and satisfaction rather than ritual or trend, this is a dependable option. The darker roast also means lower perceived acidity, which makes it easier on sensitive stomachs compared to lighter roasts. That's not a defect, it's a feature that serves a specific audience. Peet's has maintained this blend largely unchanged since the 1970s, which speaks to its foundational quality. In an industry that constantly chases new trends and seasonal offerings, maintaining the same product for over 50 years requires confidence in the formula. Major Dickason's was designed during an era when dark roasts dominated American coffee culture, but it was crafted with more care than most of its contemporaries. While many brands from that period have either disappeared or drastically reproduced, Peet's kept this blend intact because it works. The roasting technique Peet's uses allows for full caramelization of the bean's natural sugars without carbonization. That's the line between a developed dark roast and a burnt one. When done correctly, dark roasting can reduce certain acids that cause stomach irritation while preserving the compounds that provide caffeine and flavor. This is why some people who struggle with lighter, brighter coffees find dark roasts like Major Dickason's easier to drink regularly. Starbucks Pike Place roast deserves to be here not because it's exceptional, but because it's controlled. That distinction matters. Pike Place is one of the most standardized coffees on the planet. The beans are sourced at massive scale, but the roasting process is tightly regulated, which keeps the flavor profile stable. It's a medium roast designed to be neutral, low in acidity, and broadly acceptable. For many people, especially those sensitive to strong or acidic coffee, that neutrality is exactly the point. You can find Pike Place almost anywhere in the world, from supermarkets to airports, and it tastes essentially the same. While Starbucks has plenty of heavily roasted, bitter options, Pike Place stands apart as one of the least aggressive. It's not a coffee for exploration or complexity. It's a coffee for routine. And for millions of people, routine is what keeps coffee from becoming a problem instead of a pleasure. The roast level is deliberately conservative to avoid alienating any segment of their customer base. That might sound like a compromise, but in practice it creates a product that most people can drink without issue. Starbucks operates one of the most sophisticated supply chain systems in the coffee industry. They purchase beans years in advance, store them in climate-controlled facilities, and roast them in regional facilities to minimize time between roasting and retail. For Pike Place specifically, they blend beans from Latin America to create a profile that's smooth and approachable. The quality control at each stage is designed to eliminate outliers. Beans that are too acidic, too bitter, or defective in any way are removed before they reach the roaster. This industrial approach to coffee gets criticized by specialty coffee enthusiasts, but it serves a purpose. Most people drinking coffee at home don't want to think about variables like grind size, water temperature, or extraction time. They want coffee to be simple and reliable. Pike Place delivers that. It's forgiving in preparation, works well with various brewing methods, and produces a consistent cup regardless of user skill. That accessibility has value. If you're finding this breakdown useful, there's more like it on this channel. Direct information without unnecessary filler. These videos are made for people who prefer clarity over hype, and subscribing ensures you don't miss future content built the same way. Nespresso original line capsules, specifically the pure Arabica blends like Voluto or Arpeggio, are often overlooked because of the capsule format, but the coffee itself is surprisingly consistent. The advantage here is portion control and freshness. Each capsule is sealed, which limits oxidation and variability. The sourcing is global, the roasting is controlled, and the extraction parameters are predefined. That removes most of the variables that cause bad coffee at home. While capsule coffee is not ideal for everyone, and environmental concerns are valid, from a purely practical standpoint it delivers repeatable results. These blends are available in dozens of countries, and the flavor profile is designed to avoid extremes. For people who want simplicity without sacrificing basic quality, this is a workable solution. The aluminum capsules protect the coffee from light, air, and moisture until the moment of brewing. This level of protection is difficult to achieve with traditional packaging methods. Nespresso also standardizes the entire brewing process. The machine controls water temperature, pressure, and flow rate. The capsule controls dose and grind size. This removes almost all user error from the equation. You press a button, and you get the same result every time. For someone who doesn't want coffee to be a hobby or a daily challenge, this matters significantly. The consistency isn't just about taste, it's about removing friction from a routine task. The Voluto blend, for example, is designed to be light and sweet, with subtle fruit notes that never become sharp or sour. Arpeggio goes darker, with cocoa and roasted notes, but still avoids the burnt character of poorly executed dark roasts. Both blends showcase how much control Nespresso has over their process. They're not trying to impress coffee experts. They're trying to deliver the same good cup every single day to regular consumers. That's a different goal, and they execute it well. What all 5 of these coffees have in common is not prestige, rarity, or storytelling. It's process control. When a brand can control sourcing, roasting, storage, and distribution at scale, the end product becomes predictable. Predictability in coffee reduces the chance of excessive bitterness, sharp acidity, and digestive discomfort. Most problems people associate with coffee are not caused by coffee itself, but by poor processing, masked by dark roasting or flavor additives. Lavazza and Illy operate on a model that prioritizes long-term stability. They don't change blends frequently, and they don't chase seasonal hype. This matters because the human body adapts to routine. A coffee that tastes radically different from one batch to the next forces constant adjustment, which can show up as stomach irritation or sleep disruption. Stable blends reduce that friction. You drink them, they do their job, and they step out of the way. The physiological aspect is worth expanding on. Your body develops a tolerance and rhythm around the specific compounds in your regular coffee. When those compounds shift dramatically different acid profiles, varying caffeine concentrations, inconsistent roast levels, your system has to recalibrate. For some people, that shows up as jitters, for others as digestive upset, and for others as disrupted sleep patterns. It's not that any individual batch is necessarily bad. It's that the inconsistency itself creates stress on your system. This is also why switching between wildly different coffee styles can be jarring. If you drink a light, fruity Ethiopian one day and a dark French roast the next, your body experiences those as two different substances, not variations of the same product. The 5 coffees on this list stay within narrow parameters, which makes them easier for your body to process consistently over time. Peet's Major Dickason blend shows how strength doesn't have to mean aggression. The misconception is that bold coffee must be harsh. In reality, harshness comes from defects in over-roasting, not intensity. When beans are properly developed, darker profiles can still be smooth. This is why some people feel worse after drinking cheap dark roasts than after drinking a controlled, well-developed one. It's not the darkness, it's the damage done during roasting. The economic incentive in the coffee industry often encourages covering up defects with heavy roasting. Lower-grade beans with physical damage, insect infestation, or mold contamination can be roasted dark enough that these problems become difficult to detect by taste. Consumers end up drinking coffee that looks uniform but contains compounds that cause discomfort. Brands like Peet's invest more in sourcing quality beans up front, which means they don't need to hide anything with aggressive roasting. Another factor is freshness after roasting. Coffee begins losing volatile aromatic compounds immediately after roasting. Within 2 weeks, significant degradation occurs. Within a month, the coffee is noticeably stale to anyone paying attention. Stale coffee tastes flat and bitter, and it sits heavier in the stomach. All 5 brands on this list have systems in place to minimize the time between roasting and consumption. That's part of why they feel easier to drink than cheaper alternatives, even when the roast level seems similar. Starbucks' Pike Place sits in a category of its own. It's engineered to offend no one. Low acidity, medium body, minimal aftertaste. It's not trying to impress, and that's why it works for such a broad audience. Many people over 40 or 50 gradually lose tolerance for acidic or overly bitter coffee but keep drinking out of habit. Pike Place often feels easier without people knowing why. It's not because it's weaker, it's because it's restrained. The restraint is deliberate. Starbucks could make Pike Place more interesting by pushing acidity, increasing body, or adding complexity through different bean origins. But interesting isn't always better for daily consumption. Interesting coffee grabs your attention. Neutral coffee fades into the background, and for a morning routine, fading into the background is often ideal. You're not drinking it for an experience. You're drinking it because it supports your day without demanding attention. This is also why Pike Place succeeds in so many different contexts. It works in offices, hotels, airports, and homes. It works for people who take their coffee black and for people who add milk and sugar. It works early in the morning and in the afternoon. That versatility comes from staying in the middle of every spectrum, not too strong, not too weak, not too acidic, not too flat. It's a masterclass in moderation. Nespresso's original line capsules introduce another important concept: elimination of variables. Grinding size, dose, water contact time, and pressure are fixed. That removes user error almost entirely. For people who don't want coffee to become a hobby, this matters. The environmental impact of capsules is a legitimate concern, but from a purely functional perspective, the format solves most of the problems that make home coffee inconsistent. Traditional brewing methods require decisions at every step. What grind size should you use? How much coffee per cup? What water temperature? How long should it brew? Each of these variables interacts with the others, creating a matrix of possibilities where most combinations produce mediocre results. Nespresso collapses that matrix into a single button. The trade-off is less control. But for most people, that's not a loss, it's a relief. The capsule format also solves the staling problem in a unique way. Each serving is individually sealed until use, which means the coffee in your 10th capsule is just as fresh as the coffee in your first. With traditional bags of coffee, once you open them, the clock starts ticking. Even with good storage, you're fighting oxidation. Capsules avoid that entirely. This is why even people who own high-end espresso equipment sometimes keep Nespresso machines around, not because the coffee is better, but because it's more reliable when they don't want to think about it. There is no single best coffee for everyone. What exists are coffees that are less likely to cause problems. That's a different standard, and it's a more honest one. Marketing pushes novelty and excitement because those sell. Stability doesn't sound exciting, but it keeps people drinking coffee for decades without issues. The goal isn't to find the most impressive coffee. The goal is to find the coffee that works for you day after day without gradually undermining your health or comfort. Another point that's often overlooked is availability. A coffee can be excellent and still be a bad recommendation if most people can't buy it. All 5 coffees discussed here are distributed internationally, found in supermarkets, online stores, or major retail chains. That matters because consistency only works if you can repeat the choice. If you have to constantly switch brands due to availability, you lose the benefit of familiarity, and your body loses the advantage of adapting to a stable routine. There's also a psychological aspect. When people stop chasing the perfect coffee and settle into something dependable, consumption naturally becomes more moderate. You're less likely to overdrink chasing stimulation or flavor highs. That alone reduces many of the side effects people blame on caffeine. Good coffee isn't about intensity, it's about balance that you can sustain. None of these brands are flawless. All of them operate at scale, which means compromises exist, but they compromise in controlled ways, not chaotic ones. They don't promise transformation or life-changing experiences. They promise repetition. And repetition, when done well, is what most daily habits actually need. What ultimately makes these 5 coffees work is that they respect limits. They don't try to be everything at once. They don't push extremes of flavor, stimulation, or identity. That restraint is exactly what keeps them drinkable over long periods of time. Many people don't stop drinking coffee because they dislike it. They stop because coffee gradually starts working against them. Sleep becomes lighter. The stomach becomes sensitive. Anxiety feels sharper. And instead of questioning the product, people often blame age, stress, or caffeine itself. In reality, the problem is usually cumulative exposure to poorly processed or inconsistent coffee. Another reason these brands hold up is their investment in quality control infrastructure. Illy, for example, has long-standing relationships with growers and pays premiums for meeting strict standards. Lavazza operates massive blending facilities designed to smooth out variability. Peet focuses on freshness and roast development. Starbucks has unmatched logistical control. Nespresso designs its entire system around repeatability. These are not accidents, they are structural decisions that cost money but produce better outcomes. People often underestimate how much logistics affect taste. Coffee doesn't exist only at the farm or the roaster. It exists in warehouses, on trucks, on shelves. Every step introduces risk of degradation. Brands that manage those steps well produce coffee that feels calmer in the cup. You may not consciously notice it, but your body does. In the end, good coffee is not the one that makes the strongest impression on day one. It's the one that causes the fewest problems over time. These 5 brands are not perfect, but they are stable, controlled, and widely available. For most people, that's more than enough. You don't need the best coffee in the world. You need a coffee that doesn't quietly work against you. And these 5 are among the safest bets you can make, no matter where you live. If this kind of direct, practical information is what you're looking for, this channel continues in the same direction: less performance, more substance. The next videos follow the same principle, and staying connected means you'll have access to them as they're released.